In addition to eliciting some laughter having to do with the Bernanke interchange in South Carolina and the interstate highway commission, it sounded almost as if he was giving a farewell speech about his tenure at the Federal Reserve. He
was looking back at his experience, wasn't he? It had to be a little frustrating on a day, 100 years of the Federal Reserve history. The initial questions were all about 1/8 of 1% of that history, what's happened over the last 6 weeks. You could really see him open up when he started talking about the longer perspective.
He also opened up when he talked about the Depression in the 1930s in the United States and the response of the Federal Reserve during that particular period of time, and contrasting that with the response of the Federal Reserve during current crisis.
To put it in the passive tense, mistakes were made. It's pretty clear both in terms of not recognizing the threats to financial stability and responding in terms of policy in a very conventional way, and then lastly not coordinating across the major industrial countries.
And I also want to mention that he did speak of Carmen Reinhart.
There was a shout out there.
Go ahead, tell us everyone who maybe they're not familiar, who is Carmen Reinhart?
That would be my wife.
Yes.
And I believe this morning she was at the same conference making the point that it's very important that the Federal Reserve appreciate that it's an open economy, that so much of our holdings of government securities are actually in official hands, more than the Federal Reserve's holding, and therefore poses risks in terms of exchange rates and sovereign spreads.
Well, he talked about currency wars and the potential for those. I want to turn now to Phil Mattingly. He joins us from Washington. Bloomberg News reporter Phil Mattingly, you've been listening to Federal Reserve Chairman Ben Bernanke answer questions at the NBER in Cambridge. What do you come away with? What are some of the points that we need to focus on?
Well, I think there were a couple things I noticed, Pimm, and that was obviously the first question. One, you could tell I think he was a little bit frustrated with it. I think he enjoys the legacy part. He enjoys the academic setting. When you're talking about policy stuff, that's obviously a bit more intense. I think once again we saw a defense of what the Fed's been trying to do in terms of their communication efforts. I think what Bernanke's point was today is, look, consider the counterfactual. Consider what would have happened if we weren't trying to communicate this. Perhaps people would build up positions thinking that these bond purchases would be going on indefinitely. So I think there's a defense there. You know, there's another thing that I thought was interesting too when you talk about kind of the political environment that everything is in right now, and that's that they are looking at the kind of fiscal situation right now, and they're wary of what the changes Congress has put into place are going to the impact that those are actually going to have. They think they have a handle on it, but I think he even said, you know, when we are doing our forecast, we're worried about the lags. We're not totally sure some of the fiscal issues that have been put into place over the last 6 to 8 months, what kind of impact those are going to have. So I think that's a really interesting thing to watch going forward.